right, everybody, welcome to WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. My name is Adam Messer, and I am your host for this next 2 hours of the Adam Messer Show. And I have a very special guest with me today. His name is Randyl Bishop. Welcome, Randyl. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. So, everybody, just a little bit of a background with Randyl. I met him here in Savannah. It was about 6 years ago, Randyl? Like at NomeCon, I think it was 2014.
Yep, that's right. That's right around the time I started my art business.
Mm-hmm. And you had the first Hawk of New York. So, everybody, Randyl is an artist and a musician. We're going to be playing songs from his it's actually called A New Way, and it's by Mantlepiece, and they did the soundtrack. But before we get into that, Randyl, I always have my son Sebastian play some music for me live, and I know you probably can appreciate that being a musician yourself. So
absolutely, I am.
Sebastian, you mind playing? And this is Sebastian Messer, everybody. Awesome. Thank you, Sebastian. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Sebastian.
So, yeah, Randyl, what I like to do, too, is give a shout-out to the folks listening in. So, is there anybody that you'd like to give a shout-out to that might be tuning in?
Well, I guess my family, my wife, Ashley, my kids, I believe they'll be listening to it. If not right now, they'll be listening to it pretty soon.
Cool. Yeah, because we have the podcast afterwards, too. So...
Yeah, and I've got some more shout-outs like later on. I think I have some thank yous that I want to give out, but I'd like to do that more towards the end if I can.
Yeah, no problem. We got the next 2 hours to hang out. So I want to give a shout-out to Terry and Darlene Dremel. And Randyl, Terry created the Stee Range comics. And so just kind of like when I met you, I was like, wow, this is so cool with the comic book and and all that. And so he's actually here in Savannah, and Darlene helps him with the publishing and all that stuff. And it's pretty cool. So they said that they'd be tuning in today. And then I want to give a shout out to Miss Harriet, who is, she's a very nice lady who's a good friend of theirs. And I want to give a shout out to Connie and everybody else listening. So thanks a lot, y'all, for tuning in. And we really appreciate you listening in. So, all right, man. Yeah. So, man, tell us a little bit about yourself. And like, I know, I kind of feel like I know, because I've been following along with you along the way.
You've been a part of some of the history, sir.
I love it. But I would love to hear what like telling like the fans out there.
You mentioned NomeCon, and NomeCon. I'm not sure if it's still going on. I hope it is.
It actually they shut down about 2 years ago. But it was one of those things where it was kind of like time to move on. And then crazy enough, talking about that, and not, this is just like a to be announced later on.
Very unique convention. Very unique.
But I had talked to Trish and them about doing something called Savannah Game Con, and I'd wanted to do it this year, but it kind of, with a global pandemic.
Yeah, with everything going on.
So we're going to be looking at like next year or so, trying to do something, but back to NomeCon, man.
Yeah, well, that was literally, I'm not sure if you were at NomeCon 2 or NomeCon 3. I was at both, but NomeCon 2 was my very first time of, hey, I think I can do this by myself. Like, it was like the very first time I was like, I'm pretty sure I've been to enough conventions as a fan, and then I did a couple of shared tables before that con. And at the time, I had just stood up my art business. I started it with 1/3 the amount of money I really needed.
Yeah.
So, a little bit premature start, but it was just the situation I was in kind of made that uh, not possible, made it. What is the word I'm looking for?
Right.
Necessary.
Yeah.
Necessary. That's the
Yeah.
word I'm looking for. But the business has kept going, and I've managed to have just some fantastic clients. The very best client I've got is the Silvers. They're a band that's based in California, and they've commissioned me to do several music videos.
Oh, I
And
love
Mick,
those. I love those
it,
videos.
it's a all ages appropriate, family friendly,
It reminds me of like the
very
Scooby
very
Doo
weird
kind of.
stuff.
It reminds me kind of like the Scooby Doo stuff, like the way that.
Yeah, they kind of wacky humor and
Yeah.
sort of a 60s 70s vibe is what we're trying to go for.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
They just won an award
the
too, not too long ago, right?
Absolutely. I'm proud to say that one of the awards they won was the Academia Best Music Video Award. It was the first music video of all the ones I've done that I co-wrote. So I felt very proud.
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
thought that
holy
was so
crap! Yeah,
awesome.
like
Yeah.
they're getting an award for something I had a hand in. And
Mm-hmm.
they're Mick, the lead singer, has been just wonderful work with, and he's added it all up to something like 45 minutes worth of stuff. They're all on YouTube. So if you have a family that's into music at all, like they're worth looking up, checking out.
Yeah,
But
it's
that's
it's,
not
it's
the
got like
music
that kind of '60s vibe to it. Yeah, it's just kind of like
Yeah,
easy
yeah.
pop kind of fun music, and the cartoon, like, man, it reminds me so much like a Scooby Doo. The cartoon style that you did,
Mhm.
it's of course it's its own original thing of the characters,
Right, and
but
they are huge Beatles fans, and
yeah,
I've kind of like slowly become a Beatles fan in my adult years. Like I'm traditionally more of an Elvis guy, but Mick is like, hey, you remember that scene from Help? And I'm like, no. So I go to Amazon, I order Help, and
good thing
watch
for
the
you
movie. I'm
two,
like,
right?
oh, there's like a whole aspect to the Beatles I never really
Oh yeah,
understood very well.
oh
Coming
yeah,
from a military family, they weren't really considered a household name in my household growing up in a kind of more strict military environment. That was a different era, different era.
yeah.
So,
So I remember when I first met you, yeah, you had your table. It was right there at the front, and I was doing photos for Spotted, and it was 2014. So I don't know if it was NomeCon 2 or NomeCon 3.
it
Um,
must have been two. It must have been two. I had a lot of zombie art at the time. I
you
was
were
doing.
doing, yeah, I was gonna say you were doing a mural type poster board of some
Yep.
zombie
Hmm.
stuff, and we were
Yep.
talking for like hours, and then I would go around, like we would talk, and then I'd come back around, we talk, and then, like 3 days of the convention, and like we're hanging out and stuff, and I don't know, we just kind of hit it off and had good time.
Absolutely. I think we both have business minds, and that when business minds meet, we always have a lot to talk
Well, that
about.
was something else too, like with your thing, because I have an MBA, you have an MBA, and that's one
Hmm.
of the things that we were talking about. I was like, okay, this is it's kind of cool, like it is kind of like like having that same kind of mindset. And I had not at the time, I hadn't really published anything, and I was trying to figure out like, okay, this is something I like, and I've always loved comic books. I've always been a comic book fan. I mean, I grew
Me
up
too.
reading
Oh yeah, me
comics and
too.
drawing, and so that was one of the things I thought was so cool, especially with your Hawk of New York. Now, can you tell people
It,
that what the Hawk of New York is? And
Yeah, absolutely. Like in growing up, I feel you on reading comics and being a big comics fan because I grew up in rural Arkansas, in Salem, Arkansas, a tiny little town in the north of Arkansas, and the one of the big ways of being entertained was to buy comic books, and you'd buy
hmm
them at the grocery store or the pharmacy. There weren't really any comic book stores around, but there were antique stores that would have back issues and stuff.
yeah,
So I would stumble upon things like Ghost Rider and early Batman. Not early Batman, but earlier Batman.
yeah, like
uh,
'70s
eight-
stuff,
80s, yeah. Like
'80s,
I
yeah.
found a best of DC Comics Digest,
Oh
number
wow,
2, and it was a collection of all the best Batman stories up till like 1984, and it had Neil Adams in it. It had the origin story where Lou Moxon hired Joey Chill to kill. All that story is just great.
hmm
There's the Joker Fish story and some others with featured Robin becoming a man. Um, kind of getting a little bit more disillusioned with his Robin role. Very important stuff that I had no idea that Batman would blow up into what it is now. No idea. This was the '80s, so he was just barely coming back to being a popular character again after sort of a slump after the '60s show. Popularity waned in the '70s. Anyway, the Hawk of New York was inspired by a lot of things. The Ghost Rider comic cover that I saw. There was some taboo television that came on. Street Hawk was the name of this made-for-TV movie, and I saw some trailers for that. I never watched the show, but it captured my imagination enough that I realized I needed an antagonist to go with my protagonist, and I drew monsters and I would have them fight monsters, and that will come into play later in this series. I created the character Nighthawk, which is a name that's used by both Marvel and DC Comics.
Yeah.
And probably some other companies. So I felt the name was played out when I decided to reboot it about 5 years ago. And that's when I was at GnomeCon. That was, like I said, my first real action as an independent art business, and it was a little bit of a proof of concept to see if I even really do this. And
I think, Randy, if I'm thinking back, I actually think, wasn't I the first one to buy the issue? Because I remember you were
definitely among the first, if not the first.
Because I remember I was like, wow, you got the blank cover, and I asked you if you could draw something on it, and you drew the Hawk. And I just thought it was I mean, my memory's probably failing here. Maybe I just want to kind of glorify it and be like, yeah, I was the first, but I know it was so cool that
it's entirely possible. And I'm sorry, I don't recall.
I don't remember either, but I know it was we were talking about it because you had the blank cover, which the blank covers, everybody, for you non-comic book nerds, that's a variant cover, variants have been really popular the last 10 years or so, but they had blank covers where artists could, make special one-of-a-kind commission drawings or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that cover had a lot of versatility. I think when I designed it, I wasn't even thinking that it could be a sketch cover. I just wanted something bold and simple, and something that stood out from all the other stuff that was out there at the time. Everybody, for some reason, during that era, had an orange cover. Orange was incredibly popular for 5 years.
Yeah.
A 5-year stint, and everything was gradients and lens flares, and the color was just it felt overdone. The inks even weren't black inks. They would make it a different color, off color, to make it look more photographic. And to me, that's not where the fun of comics lies. It's not in being photographic. It's being in the cartooniness of it. Hey, this doesn't exist. It's fantasy. It's not going to remind you of our dreary lives. I don't want to be reminded of reality when I read a comic. I want to escape reality. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So I tend to be a little bit cartoony when I draw, and embrace that. I'm trying to improve my craft daily. I'm working daily. I've got my own studio now.
Wow.
So I'm working actively to make it more competitive and a better product overall.
Wow. Hold that thought for just a second. Everybody, you're listening to WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. This is the Adam Messer Show, and I'm your host, Adam Messer, and my special guest today is Randyl Bishop. And you've got timebound.co is your website, right?
That's right. That's timebound.com was taken.
Okay, yeah. So, hey, what do you think about, you want to play one of the songs off of the album?
That would be great. If you'd permit me, I'd like to give a brief history of this song.
Yes.
This was a song that's very unique to this album. It was written by my friend Matthew Charles Miller from my hometown in Arkansas, Salem, Arkansas, and he wrote it in about less than 24 hours. He remembers the original.
Which song is this again now? What's the name of it? Is it the Guess You're Gone one, or?
This one is on the album. It's called Eric's Theme.
Eric's Theme. Okay.
Yeah. Now the existing music video and the original song, which I did, is on YouTube, and it's called Eric's Theme 100,000 Crossroads. I think the name of it is 100,000 Crossroads, and then Eric's themes in parentheses. Now this version is my Mantlepiece, and it's more of a studio production, and it's got a lot more robust. You'll hear what I'm talking about in it, but yeah, that's it. I mean, I was very excited when the band agreed to cover Matthew's song, and Matthew, again, he remembered the original Nighthawk Presents series that Hawk of New York is loosely based on. So Hawk of New York is a reboot of that high school idea, and what would it look like now? I kept wanting to know. So I said it in the era that the Nighthawk was created, or the Hawk of New York was created.
And I'll tell you something else too, Randy. Randall, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call you Randy. I've meant to call you Randall.
I answered
so like bad.
No, I answered both.
Anyway,
I'm happy to answer both.
Randall, I remember when you had your video, your music video, and I remember the 100,000 Crossroads, and like the song, because the first one you had the soundtrack, right? And so this is the Mantlepiece one, right? This is the from the Hawk of New York soundtrack, and yes. I'll be honest with you, being such a comic book nerd, I love talking with other creators, and every time you and I've talked over the years, I always feel like you're always doing something new and working. And y'all, I want to tell you about the big bag of stuff that I got recently. So we'll talk about that after. But let's play Eric's theme now.
Yeah, let's hit it.
Wow. I'm gonna tell you, I love it.
Um, thank you. On my end, I'm hearing silence, so I'm assuming that it's
Oh,
being broadcast just fine.
oh,
So it's like,
that's weird.
do I make noise or not?
Hold on one second. Let me see
um,
what's up with that. I'm not sure why you would not have heard it.
well, it's okay. I've heard it many times.
Okay.
So if I'm the only one that missed out, then it's not a big deal.
All right. Oh, actually, we got a message from Darlene and Terry. They said it was a great song, so
Oh, that's
they heard
fantastic.
it.
I'm glad they liked it.
Yeah. So
Um,
tell me a little. You started talking about the background with Eric's theme. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Eric's theme, again, like it was written by Matthew Charles Miller. He remembered the original character, so all of the imagery in that song that he brought to bear was very accurate and spot on, and part of it was a little bit ahead of the curve of where I what I really needed. I needed something for the first two issues. That's what it was really for.
Mm-hmm.
But it also meant to serve as like a badging for the character writ large. So what that means is like I needed I didn't grow up in the 60s, but I know the theme song to Paladin. I never watched a single episode of Paladin, but I know the theme song to Paladin.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
catchy enough that I know it from the movie Stand By Me, where they, Gordy and the guys are all singing Paladin, like walking down the railroad tracks looking for a dead body and singing a song. And I wanted something that was kind of like that, where it was, hey, let's unify behind this one song and find out, let's explore what the world looks like through this guy's eyes. Eric Warden is the Hawk of New York, and he is a half American Indian, half Caucasian guy who has been orphaned into a corrupt state system. These are topics that are very relevant today. This is stuff that speaks to my own connection, loose as it may be, to Native American culture and heritage. I've got a little bit of Creek ancestry and possibly some Cherokee ancestry too. Can't prove the Cherokee stuff, but can definitely prove the Creek stuff. And that whole culture has been not given the mouthpiece that it should be. And I thought it would be cool to turn Nighthawk into sort of it would strengthen the character if he were connected to that culture as well, and give me a chance to talk about some of the myths that I've come across in my own research and readings. And I generally use the term American Indian not as a slur, but I use it because Dennis Banks uses it in his book Ojibwe Warrior. And if you read that, it's all about the American Indian movement and some of the things that they were involved in. So it's out of respect that I use the term American Indian, and I prefer that to Native American. I use them interchangeably because at the end of the day, I'm more or less a gringo. So
Right.
I'm just a guy making comic books, and this comic book is not in any way autobiographical. It's more a labor of love than anything else. And the theme song was meant to ultimately tell and hint at the origin story and hint at the bigger character of the man. I think Eric's theme, 100,000 Crossroads, does that really well.
I think that you're absolutely right with the indigenous voices, because I also have some indigenous American heritage. It's very small. I only have 5%.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been researching and trying to trace back my family tree and find I want to find more out about my family heritage. But
it's wonderful that we live in a country that is a melting pot of ideas and of people.
Yeah.
And I think that's just wonderful. It's something that
Well, I've
people
had working here in
should be
Savannah, writing for the newspaper. I've had a chance to cover. They actually had a Low Country powwow, and I had a chance to cover that a couple of years. And so I had a chance
Awesome.
to interview and talk to some indigenous folks here lately too. So that's one of the things I like about your comic book is that you try to. You try to cover some, well, I mean, like we were talking about, like it's a comic book, right? But you also try to cover some, like you said, some things that are issues that people deal with. So that's one of the cool things I love about it. I want to, not to change the subject here, Randall, but I want to ask you some of the nuts and bolts about making comics. But before we do that, we've got a few more minutes before we do the station break.
Okay.
When you went from like the first issue, you did kind of like a traditional sized comic book issue, right? And then you switched
Right.
to the more modern format size.
That's
Can you
right.
talk
It
about
was
that?
absolutely, it was 100% intentional. I did a return to newsprint at a time when nobody was doing newsprint
Yeah.
comics.
Yeah, you were
I
like one of the only ones
remember,
out there doing newsprint.
yep, there was another comic book called The Plaid Avenger that was printed on newsprint out of Atlanta. And I figured out who their printer was, and then I found another printer in Pulaski, Tennessee, and ended up going with Pulaski Web. I think it's called Pulaski Web Press. But uh, after about a year or so, Peter Samedi from Alterna Comics messaged me and was like, "Hey, who'd you print with?" And I'm like, "Well, Pulaski in Tennessee, and there's this other place in Atlanta." And he's like, "Okay, great, cool." And then a couple days later, he has this huge announcement on Bleeding Cool that he's announcing a new return to newsprint line, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool! Like, this
Mm-hmm.
is so cool." Because now it's like, oh, I've been, my feelings of a need to return to classical look and feel of comics are validated. Like someone else thought along the same lines I did. To say he stole my idea is absolutely not accurate at all. First of all, it's not an idea. You can't steal a format. Second
Yeah, it
of
was a
all,
format that was already around before. It's not
great
like,
minds think
yeah.
alike.
Well, I remember when they switched over from newsprint to like glossy. Like Image was one of the first ones with like Spawn and their other comics. They were like one of the first ones to upgrade to a higher grade paper and all that. And then Marvel and DC followed suit and whatever. But I thought it was so cool because the nostalgia of it, the retro part of it, the
I did a
oversized
couple.
comic.
I did a couple other things to try to tie into nostalgia too. In addition to newsprint, I made it golden age format, a format that
Mm-hmm.
died in the 80s. Like in the early 80s, they stopped making golden age format size because it was just too expensive. The paper was too big,
Mm-hmm.
and unwieldy, and everybody was going to the more modern, slimmer design. It was more handy, to carry around too. So that was one other way. Another way was to make, it's all about issues two. Anybody can sell an issue one. Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody can sell an issue two. If you get past issue two, then you might have something. If you could sell your issue two and still hold your head up high, then you got something. So the way I sold my issue two was I made it a cliffhanger, and I bundled them together in the book and record set. I have about 50 left in my store. It's 1,000 print run, so not a huge
What?
imprint.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. That's awesome, Randall.
so these are still for sale. So
You
my,
sold
my
over 950 copies of number two. Wow.
Yep.
I remember.
And
I,
it's packaged together. So it's in the 80s you have these clamshell things with either a cassette tape or a record,
mm-hmm.
and mine comes with either the full blown album or the single album. I'm almost out of the single album, but I've got still plenty of copies of the album left. The price tag on that just can't be lowered any more than it already is for to try to get back the sync licensing I had to pay for that first album.
Mm-hmm.
But the new album, oh my gosh, there's no sync licensing in that. The band is 100% behind what I'm doing, and it has been for some time. They've been waiting on me to get my act together enough to really promote this, and I am so grateful for their patience and for their insight into letting me see their process and making music and putting together these wonderful projects.
Definitely. Hey, we're gonna break for the station ID and all, everybody, and then we're gonna come back right after and talk more with Randall about like the nuts and bolts of comic book making and that kind of stuff. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This portion of WRUULP Savannah Soundings programming is brought to you by listeners and the Ships of the Sea Museum. The William Scarborough House, located on MLK Boulevard, is home to the Ships of the Sea Museum and is the earliest example of the use of Greek Revival architecture in a domestic setting in the South. Celebrate 200 years of the William Scarborough House. Find out more about Ships of the Sea Museum at the website shipsofthesea.org. Now you have a chance to support both Savannah Independent Artists and WRUU during this shelter-in-place order to stop the spread of COVID-19. Creatives in Need is a group of independent artists hosted by the Roots Up Gallery, which is collaborating with WRUU during this shelter in place to offer an online art gallery at www.rootsupgallery.com. For every work of art sold at this online gallery, the artists receive 80% from the sales and 20% goes to WRUU and its programs like Art on the Air. Interested listeners can go to www.rootsupgallery.com to start shopping today.
WRUU 107.5 FM is a new and different listener-supported and all-volunteer community radio station for Savannah. Our diverse broadcast and web programming is supported by generous listeners who value our passion and spunk. We are independent of other media and receive no government or large corporate support. People like you are our largest and most important source of our funding. Go to wruu.org to find out how you can make a one-time or a monthly contribution. Thank you.
All right, everybody, and you are tuning in to the Adam Messer Show, and I'm your host, Adam Messer, and my special guest today is Randyl Bishop, who is an artist and a musician, a comic book creator. You do a lot of things, Randyl, so thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure, Adam. Thanks for having me on the show. It's been a very pleasant half hour so far.
Oh yeah. I want to get into the nuts and bolts of the comic book side, but before we do that, let's we've got another half an hour. Let's this is the mid hour. Let's go ahead and play another one of the songs. So can you tell us introduce like the next song that you want to play?
Absolutely. This one's called "Crazy Horse's Dream," and it's the video component that will be released in accordance with this one retells a real dream that Crazy Horse had that pretty much chronicled events that happened in his life, or the events that are thought to happen. And we're finding out more truth about Crazy Horse himself. There's been a book released by the family, the direct descendants of Crazy Horse, the grandson. I believe the Clown family, last name is Clown. And the name of the book is Crazy Horse, Lakota Warrior's Life and Legacy. Definitely worth reading. It's really good. I was fortunate enough to meet them. We spoke about the Crazy Horse name, and it's entirely possible that if I re-release this album with a video, that the name Crazy Horse goes away. It just becomes simply The Dream. The reason for this is more to show respect for the family, who now they've reclaimed their rights and their legacy, like rightfully so, to the Crazy Horse thing. But all of this was done before I knew any of that and before I met them. So I gave them some complimentary copies and shook their hand, took a photo with them. They're very wonderful people. Mr. Com was very accommodating and forthright with me. And I believe the author's name was Bill Mattson. He was also likewise accommodating. But enough about that. This was a very unique song done by Mantlepiece, the band, off the album A New Way, and you can take it away.
All right, everybody. Here is Crazy Horse by Mantlepiece. Wow, that was great.
It was very atmospheric. I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You know, everybody, I had when I was talking to Randall about coming on the show, I'd asked him because the thing is, and it's kind of weird because like talking. I'm not trying to talk about you in third person, Randall, but I'm just trying to give everybody kind of like a perspective here.
I talk about me in third person,
right?
So that's fine.
Well, so a little backstory here. So when I was asking Randall if he would come on the show, I was like, hey man, and then you told me about you had the new album, and I was like, okay, cool, and so I went on one of the downloading sites and I bought the album and I listened to it, and I listened to the whole thing all the way through this same night. I didn't listen to it because I was right then I was on a break at work or whatever, and it was just one of those things where the whole album has a lot of symbolism and has a lot of different plays, but I just love the vocals. I love the instrumental parts of the music, and
I'm really happy to hear all of that. This band, Mantlepiece, they've been around for a long time. They have a lot of material out there. I mean, it's pretty much on every platform: YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, Amazon Music, just about anything. If it makes noise, they're on it. They have been inspired by Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd had its heyday in a different era of music history than what we're in now. Now everything is very short. It's it either punches you in the face or it dies. And that's the kind of music we listen to now.
Yeah.
In the 70s, it was more of a coming to full maturity with you had new technology coming in. You had people realizing they could make their lives or make a living doing nothing but music. So you had a lot of bands and you had a lot of just really good music coming out of the lessons learned from the 60s. And it just created this listening experience. If you ever listen to a Pink Floyd album, it's not really a song. It's an experience. You need to set aside a couple hours or more to really take in Pink Floyd and really understand what the band's all about. The Wall is a huge inspiration for what I'm trying to do with the animation attached to this album. And I've watched and rewatched that many times, trying to figure out if there's anything that I can learn from their process, from what they did, and incorporate it into what I'm trying to do. More modern take on this is something that Sturgill Simpson has recently done on Netflix. Sturgill Simpson has a collection of music available on Netflix that's atmospheric. It's done by the same animation team that did Batman Ninja. That very detailed, very good animation, very strong body of work, and a couple of songs that are just really standout hits. I'm not trying to praise my competition, my better resource competition that much, but I'm trying to see that there's this attitude that everything's got to punch you in the face or die. And I think that's, in a nutshell, something that's wrong. Like, I think that music is more of an experience. It should be given its proper due care. When you listen to music, it should be part of an experience, an overall whole. And that's what this album attempts to do. And I think it accomplishes it really well. And you got to buy the album to find out.
And okay, so let me ask you some nuts and bolts questions about comic book creating. All right.
Okay, absolutely.
And everybody, we're like the next hour and 20 minutes or so that we've got left. We're gonna play some more music off of the Hawk in New York soundtrack, and by Mantlepiece, and then Randall's gonna give us some more backdrop. So I hope you enjoy that. I did get a message from Terry and Darlene, and they said that you are a very interesting person. Thought that was kind of cool.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think I agree, y'all. I think you are a really interesting person, Randall. So,
Thanks.
Okay. So here's the thing, and I'm going to just use myself as an example, right?
Right.
I love comic books. I mean, I buy comic books. I go to local comic book stores. You know, I've drawn my whole life. Sorry, I had to adjust the mic, everybody. And as an adult, I didn't really, I haven't, you know, spent as much time drawing as I used to as a kid. Obviously, you know, adult life, you have, you know, family and kids and stuff like that and whatever. But the last couple of years or so, I've kind of gotten back into it. I really got into that Inktober last year. I kind of was like, man, this is fun and, you know, kind of, you know, different. And I made up this character called Bionic Barry. It was just kind of like a playful, you know, like a spoof character that I made. And I did like these little, just stuff on, like I did one scene. It was like a Scooby-Doo scene where it's like Bionic Barry, you know, he's the guy or whatever. And, but I've been thinking about making him into a comic book. I've been thinking about, you know, kind of making it into like a, you know, a fun.
Well, what I've figured out with Hawk of New York and with any property like is that, you know, I already talked about how music now is punch you in the face or die. Well, comics unfortunately are kind of going that route too.
Yeah.
So if you return to all the way back to Will Eisner's work on The Spirit, he had a contract with the newspaper that they would publish a 7-page comic book every week, and he would crank these out like 7 pages, just wonderful layouts. Like I don't know how he did it, but that 7-page format is about the same length as one chapter in a modern comic. So if you have 7, 14, 21, that's 21 pages. You have 3 chapters in a modern comic. If you're able to tell a story in 7 pages, then you can print it. And I've got this thing I'm calling a combi comic. We just listened to Crazy Horse's Dream, and I turned the music video. I took stills from the music video that's not released yet, and I released them in a combi comic format, so that you've got an entire comic book story that tells the story of Crazy Horse's Dream in 7 pages. I've got it folded up on a single piece of paper. It's about the size, a little bit bigger than a wallet. So you can stick it in your back pocket. You know, these I could print these up for less than $1 and sell them for anywhere from $1 to $3, depending on if I attach a CD to it or not. And people are like, oh my gosh, a comic book and a CD for $3. And I do this with the silvers, and I've just started doing it with Hawk a little bit as an experiment to see, you know, how they do. And it's a great thing. It's a great extra to throw in. On one side, you've got a full-size poster. That's the combination of a poster and a comic book. And for something like Bionic Barry, to test the waters with it, I would suggest do a 7-page story and print it up in a format similar to that. If not that,
you know,
exactly.
That's a great idea, because the thing is, like, I had a guy named Ron Fortier. He's in that pulp new pulp group that we're in. He was on here, and he's been an author for a long time, and a comic book writer. And Terry Dremel, like I said, he's, you know, done his comic book with Steve Range, and you know, of course, we all know Bobby Nash.
Oh yeah, the award-winning Bobby Nash.
Yeah, and you're the one that introduced me to Bobby, and you know, and we just it's kind of crazy, but we, you know, ever since then, it's like, you know, boom, boom, boom.
Bobby's also an actor in addition to being an author.
I know,
like
right?
It blows my mind. Like, I know this guy. Like, he's wonderful.
So when we get off of the air, I definitely would like you to tell me how to, you know, like some resources on the combi comic, because I think that would be a great way to kind of test the waters. Because there's some local shops around here that I could take it to and say, hey, you know, what do you think about this? And you see my artwork. I mean, like, you know, I feel like I'm a halfway decent artist, you know? I mean, I've got room to improve, but, you know, I feel like I'm a halfway decent artist.
Everybody's got their own style, and everybody's got a format that fits that style. And you just got to find the right format for your style and work on improving your style. That's it. That's what I'm doing. Like, I'm still searching for the perfect format. Every single project I do feels like an experiment. I learned something new working on.
Well, like this combi comic you're talking about, that's something new, and it like kind of takes me to the. I kind of talked about it earlier, but the big bag of stuff. So y'all, Randall had posted about just, you know, had some comic books for sale or whatever, and I was like, you know, man, I haven't because I have all the Hawk of New York issues. Okay, everybody, I have all the Steve Range issues. When I like something, I like to, collect it. And so I've kept up with those. And then I was like, hey, man, I'd like to buy one copy of the other stuff that you have, because I know you do like all this other stuff. And you're like, okay, yada yada yada, and you let me know what it would be and whatever. And we did that, and then like I don't know, a week later, I get this big box of stuff, everybody, and I was like, what in the world is this? And I open it up, and there's like these little mini comics. There's like a CD. There's big comics. There's a graphic novel. There's a book.
You did say you wanted one of everything.
I know. There was like an awesome keychain. There was and one of those things, like I was like, hey, you said you had a bag. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. This is like the people that embroider stuff and they like professionally done embroidery. This is the kind of bag it was. It was like, what in the world? This is so cool. So I was like, wow, this, and from when I first met you in person, and I think I saw you in person that year and the year after, but I haven't seen you in person in a while. But we keep in touch from time to time, and we're on Facebook and stuff. But I was like, man, look at all of this stuff that you've been doing, and you've gone from like that first comic of, like the newsprint, and like even your art style has, graphed and changed and morphed over the years. And
I've learned a lot from working with Mark Wright, who has Mark Wright's art, who was the first real professional inker that I hired. And then I hired Peter Palmiotti for issue 6. He did a wonderful job of inking Mitch Rogers' art. Mitch Rogers created a character called the Bogger, and that issue is like a crossover special.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite covers too, by the way.
Thank you. That was all Mitch Rogers. I colored it and I kind of edited it a little bit, added the trade dress, but that's all his artwork. There's the credits for that comic is complicated because Ricky Zero wrote a chapter of that story, and Ricky's involved with Mantlepiece. That was the first comic where the Mantlepiece album was mentioned. In the back page, I think, was the ad saying, "Hey, it's available for pre-sale. Get your orders in now." And I had some big ambitions about releasing the videos much earlier than what they will be released at. And now I'm still hemming and hawing a little bit on when I'm going to do it.
Speaking of that,
clearance to release them, but I want to kind of time it. I think I'm going to start when right around the end of August, in time for the Augusta Toy and Comic Show, also known as Joe Fest. That's here in Augusta, September 4th.
Are they actually? They're going to go through with it? Because I know a lot of things are canceling.
There's been a lot of concerns. A lot of conventions have been canceled this summer. This is timed well enough at the end of summer, and the state of Georgia has blessed off on it as legal and safe. He's taking extra precautions. There's going to be hand sanitizer everywhere.
I know they have to have like 21 different things that they have to follow.
Yeah, it's going to be fine. It's going to if you have a pre-existing condition, you can stay home. It's fine. It's okay. But if you feel safe, you want something fun to do.
We actually have enough time to play one more song this hour, Randyl.
Great.
Which one would you like to play now?
Well, let's go into the song on the album that I wrote. This is a song called Brass Taxes. And it's around the time I started my art business, I wrote this song. And at the time, I sort of had a verse that was more personal, and I've sort of reinvented the verses to make it fit the character of Eric. And this song is featured in the end of issue 4. The lyrics appear floating above Eric's head. But Brass Taxes is, it's a little bit of a play on words, a little bit more personal song than the rest of the songs on the album for me, because I am an Army officer. Brass is slang for Army officer. And at the time, I was kind of trying to escape a financial trap. And the song was, I had a baby in the house and a lot of stress. I was under a lot of stress at the time when I wrote that song. It was just about how taxing, my life was at the time. And I'm not trying to sit in my ivory tower and complain about my awesome life. Like, I love my life. I'm so grateful for all the things I have. So I'm not trying to bellyache. But again, this song was reinvented for the character of hawk as he was dealing with finding out that the people responsible for the murder of his mentor and girlfriend was still alive and still on the loose and still doing very, very evil things in the comic book. Without further ado, that's the best introduction I can give Brass Taxes.
All right, Brass Taxes, everybody. Mantlepiece. right, everybody, stay tuned. We are going to be back at the 4 o'clock hour. And you've been listening to WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.